By the early 1700s, Virginia had become the powerhouse colony, absolutely booming thanks to tobacco, and it was the central hub for the entire British Empire's reach across the Atlantic. Picture this: vast plantations lining the rivers, all connected by trade, with its heart beating on a small, marshy peninsula. Right there on the James River. For almost 100 years, Jamestown was the capital of this wild territory. It was a settlement forged in the heat of English ambition, the fierce resistance from the Powhatan people, and the harsh realities of building a new world. But as the year 1700 arrived, this historic place was quietly heading towards its end. It had survived so much fires, terrible diseases, and even rebellions, only to face being politically abandoned. The government was moving, heading for higher ground in Williamsburg. In this video, we're going to use cutting-edge digital reconstruction, alongside old maps, archaeological findings, and period sketches, to bring the lost city of Jamestown back to life. We'll show you Jamestown and its surroundings during this huge turning point, as we virtually walk through streets and buildings that have long since been reclaimed by the earth. We're not just looking at the past from far away. We're actually stepping right into it. Imagine walking through the defensive walls, the grand brick state houses, and the busy docks along the river, just as the colonists did. And stick with us until the very end, and we'll travel back to these exact spots in the present day. You'll see what time has erased, and what stubborn ruins still stand by the James River. To truly understand Jamestown in the early 1700s, we first need to explore the very land that created it. This landscape is as much a character in our story as the people themselves. We'll start our reconstruction not at the city gates, but from the river's perspective. The James River is quite wide here, a tidal estuary where fresh water from the Appalachian Mountains meets the salty waters of the Chesapeake Bay. As we drift toward the north bank, our digital reconstruction shows the geography that heavily influenced the settlement's destiny. It's a peninsula shaped like a pear, connected to the mainland by only a narrow strip of land that was often flooded. The ground here is low, marshy, and covered in dense cypress and pine trees. This spot was picked back in 1607 for defense, because the deep water meant ships could dock right up against the trees. Yet, this exact same geography would cause the city major problems with disease and isolation throughout its history. As we move onto land, the initial layer of our reconstruction shows the layout of the original James Fort, though by the 1700s, this structure had mostly disappeared, eroded by the river and overtaken by the growing town. But let's pause the story for a moment and go back in time to see its beginnings. We see the triangular palisade, made of upright logs, a desperate defense against a massive, unknown continent. Inside, the structures made of wattle and daub are very basic, clustered together under thatched roofs. This was the birthplace of the colony, the site of the starving time, where the population plummeted from 500 to just 60 in one brutal winter. But the city we're exploring today, the one that grew into a capital, expanded far beyond those wooden walls. As we move the timeline forward to the mid-17th century, the camera zooms out to reveal the new town developing east of the old fort. This is the Jamestown that became the driving force of Virginia. The buildings here tell a story of increasing stability and wealth, all thanks to the precious tobacco crop. We are now walking down the main street right along the riverbank. The crude wooden shacks from the colony's first decade are long gone. In their place, we see the emergence of brick structures. The reconstruction shows us row houses that wouldn't look out of place in London, though they were adapted for the intense Virginia heat. These buildings, known as the Ludwell State House Group, formed the important civic center of the town. They are long brick buildings with steep roofs and large chimneys. Let's step closer to the riverfront. Here, the air would be thick with the smell of tobacco being cured and the tar from ship ropes. The wharves were bustling hubs of trade. We can see barrels and hogsheads of tobacco being loaded onto English merchant ships. This trade was the lifeblood of the city. Every brick, every window pane, and every piece of fine furniture inside these homes was bought with tobacco. It was right here on these docks that the social order of the American South began to take shape. We see the arrival of indentured servants from England, poor men and women trading years of labor for the promise of owning land. And, sadly, we see the ships carrying enslaved Africans, whose forced labor would eventually replace the indentured system and define the region's economy for centuries to come. The reconstruction allows us to see how close these different worlds were. The wealthy governor's mansion stood just a few yards away from the simple living quarters of the laborers. This was a physical representation of the colony's extreme social divide. Moving inland from the river, we approach Jamestown's most recognizable building, the one that dominates the skyline in every era, the Memorial Church. By the late 1600s, the wooden churches of the past had been replaced by this strong brick structure. The tower, which we can see rising above the trees, stands as proof of the enduring presence of the Anglican faith in the colony. We can walk through the arched doorway, entering a sanctuary that served as the political and spiritual center of the town. It was here that the General Assembly, the very first representative government in English America, often met. The light filtering through the windows illuminates a space for serious discussion, where landowners in fancy coats debated taxes, made treaties with the indigenous Powhatan tribes, and established laws that would govern a growing empire. However, the story of Jamestown isn't one of constant progress. It's a history filled with conflict and destruction. To understand the state of the city as it neared the 1700s, we need to visualize the damage left behind by Bacon's rebellion in 1676. Let's adjust the lighting in our reconstruction to show this chaotic moment. Nathaniel Bacon, a wealthy but resentful planter, led an uprising against Governor William Berkeley, channeling the anger of poor settlers on the frontier who felt unprotected from Native American attacks and shut out from the governor's inner circle of power. The simulation shows the city engulfed in flames. Bacon's men, carrying torches, move through the new town, setting fire to the church, the state house, and the homes of the wealthy. The decision has been made to transfer the capital to Middle Plantation, which will soon be known as Williamsburg, a location situated on higher, healthier land a few miles inland. We can observe the colony's administrative center packing up. The lively atmosphere of the port starts to diminish. The attached houses, once the colony's highlight, are beginning to deteriorate. Some are taken apart for their bricks, which are then transported to construct the new capital. Yet, Jamestown in the early 1700s isn't instantly abandoned. It shifts into a different kind of existence. It transforms into a rural estate instead of a bustling city. We can witness the emergence of the Ambler Mansion, a grand Georgian-style plantation home erected near the remnants of the old settlement. The rebuilding emphasizes the stark contrast. The neat, symmetrical gardens of the Ambler estate are layered over the disorganized, buried streets of the 17th century city. The lively port has quieted down to a private dock. The fields where the original fort once stood are now being cultivated for corn and tobacco. The church tower remains, standing solitary against the sky, a bell tower without a congregation, as the focus of activity shifts northward. As we journey through this early 18th century rendition of the landscape, we encourage you to look carefully at the texture of the ground. The roads that were once filled with carts and hurried officials are now covered with grass. The foundations of the row houses are becoming grassy mounds, slowly returning to the earth. This is a visual representation of fading memories. The city is transforming into a specific location. However, the significance of what occurred here is more powerful than ever. The laws put into writing here, the system of human trafficking established here, and the blueprint for plantation farming developed here are spreading rapidly, encompassing the entire colony of Virginia. Jamestown is declining as a city, but it has triumphed as a colony. Let's take a moment to examine the domestic life that persisted. Imagine entering the kitchen of a surviving farmhouse on the island in 1710. The digital reconstruction illuminates the room with the warm glow from a fireplace. We see ceramics imported from England, Delftware from the Netherlands, and pewter cups. The table is set with food cultivated in the local fertile soil, such as corn, pork, and venison. Despite the capital's relocation, the individuals who remained maintained a link to the global trade network. They were no longer isolated settlers. They were part of an established Atlantic society. We can see a newspaper from London on the table, several weeks old, bringing news of the War of the Spanish Succession. We now guide the camera to the western edge of the island, where the connection to the mainland was preserved. During the 1700s, this was the location of the ferry service, transporting passengers across the James River. The reconstruction depicts the ferry landing, a crucial route even after the government departed. We observe travelers on horseback, perhaps pausing to view the ruins of the old State House before proceeding to Williamsburg. For them, Jamestown was already becoming a part of history, a place of past times. It's important to visualize the environmental shifts as well. Our simulation speeds up the geological processes. We can see the James River eroding the shoreline. The island is getting smaller. The western section, where the initial 1607 fort was situated, is being undermined by the tides. By the mid-18th century, a significant portion of the site of the first landing is submerged. The river is reclaiming the land, concealing the evidence of the early struggles beneath layers of silt and water. This erosion would persist for centuries, creating a puzzle that archaeologists would only solve in recent times. Let us now drift back toward the church tower, the island's guardian. In the 1750s, the church is still standing, but it is showing its age. The roof requires repairs. The graveyard surrounding it is filling up, serving as a record of the colony's ancestry. The tombstones, which we have digitally restored to their original readability, display the names of families like the Lees, Ludwells, and Blairs who would go on to influence the American Revolution. Standing here in the simulation, surrounded by the quiet hum of cicadas and the rustling of wind through the pines, we get a sense of the place's spectral atmosphere. It's a stark contrast to the busy, muddy, and desperate energy of the 1600s. The chaos has been replaced by a serene quietude. As we approach the end of the 18th century in our timeline, the transformation is complete. Jamestown is no longer a town in any practical sense. It has become a large farm owned by the Travis and Ambler families. The revolution passes through this area in 1781 with skirmishes occurring near the church, but the city that gave birth to the colony is gone. It has been dismantled piece by piece, its essence absorbed into the plantation society of the South. Now, fulfilling the promise we made at the beginning of this journey, we fade out the reconstruction to reveal the present day. The transition is striking. The active wharves and the smoke-filled taverns disappear. They are replaced by the meticulously kept grass and informational signs of the National Park Service and Jamestown Rediscovery. We are looking at the same locations, but the layer of time has been removed. The most significant difference is the silence, where once there was the shouting of sailors, the clanging of blacksmith hammers, and the discussions of lawmakers. There is now only the sound of tourists and the breeze from the river. We can see the old church tower, the sole 17th century structure still visible above ground. It's a rugged, weathered shell, its bricks smoothed by 300 years of wind and rain. The roof we saw in the reconstruction is gone, although a memorial church was built behind the tower in the early 20th century. Look toward the riverbank. Do you recall the triangular fort we visualized at the start? For many years, historians believed it had been completely washed away by the river. But look at the active archaeological dig site near the water. This is where modern science has achieved something remarkable. We can see the imprints of the post holes, the very stains in the soil where the original wooden walls stood. The protective seawall, constructed in the 20th century, now safeguards what remains of the site from the river that attempted to engulf it. We can also see the outline of the new settlement. Those rows of brick homes we strolled past? Now they're just brick outlines showing in the grass. Imagine ghost foundations tracing out where the streets used to be. You can spot the Ludwell State House group as just a bunch of cellars and hearths left open to the sky. It really takes a huge imagination to picture the busy capital that used to be right here, and that's exactly why this reconstruction we just went through is so incredibly important. It perfectly connects these quiet, ruined spots with the intense, real life of the past. The Ambler Mansion, which we saw built up in the 1700s, is now a ruin itself. We can see the empty shell of the house sitting in the middle of the island, a leftover from the plantation days after the city fell apart. It caught fire and was rebuilt again and again, finally burning down for good in 1898, leaving behind the jagged walls that stand here now. It's actually a double ruin, a ruin from the 1700s built right on top of 1600s ruins. Walking through Jamestown today gives you this amazing feeling of being all alone. It's a place where things started and also where they ended. Where the British Empire in America got its start, where the very first representative government met, and where the first enslaved Africans were brought to North America under English rule. It's the origin point for some of the United States' most deeply embedded challenges. The modern look, with its statues and peaceful paths, acknowledges this history, but it can't fully capture what it felt like to be in the vibrant, living city. As we wrap up this reconstruction, we're left realizing that cities can be surprisingly delicate. They're created by geography and economic forces, and when those things change, they can just disappear, leaving only faint traces in the ground. Jamestown did its job as the initial landing spot, that tough first step, and then it faded away, letting the colony it created grow past it. Thanks so much for coming along with us on this trip back through history. We've walked on the muddy streets of the 1600s, seen the flames of rebellion, and watched the slow, quiet changes of the 1700s. We've seen how a busy,